Hi, and welcome to the 2024 Pride Month episode of Still Here, Bitch. Glad you could join us. I'm really excited about our guest today, and, to be honest, I'm having a fanboy moment. Dr. Charles Hoy-Ellis is a thought leader in the health and well-being of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and other non-heteronormative LGBTQ plus individuals, families, and communities, particularly midlife and older adults. As a licensed clinical social worker, he has over 20 years experience working with LGBTQ plus communities. Also, for over 2 decades, Dr. Hoy-Ellis has taught undergrad, grad, doctoral level students, professionals, service providers, agencies, and other stakeholders. He is the training coordinator with the Age Pride Center at the University of Washington Seattle School of Social Work's Goldson Institute. Age Pride focuses on promoting knowledge transfer from basic science and clinical trials to multi-generational practice, services, education, and policy, and provides trainings on best practices for providing culturally responsive, evidence-based care for LGBTQ plus older adults. Since 2010, Dr. Hoy-Ellis has also worked with the first of its kind federally funded national ongoing project, Aging with Pride, National Health, Aging and Sexuality/Gender Study that examines the health and well-being of nearly 2,500 LGBTQ plus people aged 50 and up across the United States. This particular study is so groundbreaking and amazing that it was referenced during my master's studies program in marriage and family therapy and is also a part of the orientation curriculum at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, where I currently work. Everyone, I am thrilled to give you Dr. Charles Hoy-Ellis. Charlie, how are you?
I am good, although after hearing all of that, Gerry, I'm feeling a little blush coming on. But thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. It's a topic I'm passionate about, and so I love it. So thank you again for this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Blush works out great because Still Here Bitch's color is pink. So you'll go right on ahead with it. You'll mix with it well. Okay, let's figure it all out. So what led you to enter your line of work?
The seed was probably planted when I was 15. I came out to my parents and they promptly threw me out of the house because they weren't going to have a fag under their roof. So I'm the second of 4 boys. The one right after me was also gay. Mm-hmm. And he saw how I was treated after I came out. So he did not come out until his suicide note just before he turned 30 years old. And I didn't know anything about mental health or anything at that time. The warning signs were definitely there. I just had not any training. Fast forward a couple years when I decided to get my head out of behind and do something with my life. Started community college at the age of 38. And about the same time, I started therapy myself. So I spent about 7 years in therapy. And it was so very helpful that I finally, at the age of 38, 40, figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I wanted to be a therapist, and I wanted to work with queer people. Uh-huh. So that was probably the seed that got it all started. And then the seed for specifically with midlife and older adults. Throughout my internship, I made it clear, wouldn't it be really awesome if like the day before my internship ended, they called me in and said, "Hey, Charlie, we got a job for you." Well, it was actually 2 days before my internship ended that they called me into the office and said, "Hey, Charlie, did you know we have this position open?" Once I got my MSW, they hired me full-time. And was there until 2009 when I went back to get my PhD. A couple of things happened during that. So one was in my internship. One of the very first individual clients I saw, actually one of my very first assessments was an older gentleman. He and his partner had been in a relationship for more than 20 years. His partner was several years older. His partner was the one who worked outside of the home, and the client who came in worked inside of the home. His partner had had a massive stroke and went into a skilled nursing facility. and his Social Security benefits followed him into the skilled nursing facility. So the client I was seeing was literally facing destitution. He had no income. He had no legal right to the property or anything else. Long story short, first suicide of a client I ever experienced, but it really showed me the difference between being older and gay and being older and straight. One other quick story. So I've worked a lot with HIV positive people also, and one of my clients was approaching his 40th birthday. So this was back when protease inhibitors were still relatively new, and they had some pretty serious side effects. So the first one was called Crixivan, and there was a syndrome called Crick's belly. And essentially all the subcutaneous fat in your arms, legs, and face would be redistributed around your face. So you could pretty much tell from looking at someone that they were on Crixivan. So I said, hey, maybe it's time to start thinking about taking meds. And he looked me straight in the face and said, I'd rather be dead than old. And that was when I really started seeing the ageism within the queer communities. I've seen how more and more policies and cultural attitudes, what I call cultural gravity, you can't see it directly, but you can't escape its effects, was that so much of the mental health challenges that clients were coming in with, depression, anxiety, things like that, were either actually internalized heterosexism or at least exacerbated by that. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if I could do some research that would change policies and cultural attitudes and things like that so that so many people wouldn't be having to deal with this. So that's when I left Seattle Counseling and started my PhD at the University of Washington in fall of 2009.
Wow. So you mentioned internalized ageism. What's your take on how internalized ageism affects older gay and queer relationships in particular?
In many ways, it actually parallels the heterosexism or the ageism that we see in the larger heterosexual communities. So women in particular, value is based on youth and beauty. As you start to lose that youth and beauty, you start to lose value. And so people will spend thousands and thousands of dollars and hours trying to recapture that lost youth. And what they're basically saying to themselves is, I only matter as long as I'm young and beautiful. So with the ageism in queer communities, it is pretty pervasive, but it's much more pronounced, particularly in men's communities, less so in women's communities.
Yes.
And it's very much a similar type of thing. So I can remember, I think it was like the mid-1980s, when gay advertising within the queer community started really demarcating youth from older people. Before that, it had been pretty across the board heterogeneous. Started marketing youth to people to be more youthful. We really saw that really take off in the 1990s with the commodification of queerness by the larger community. I still remember when the term metrosexual came out. So, I'm not gay, but I'm sensitive like a gay man, and I can do my skin routines and all of that other stuff. Yeah. So that's when we really started seeing this type of marketing. One thing I do want to point out in terms of ageism within queer communities, and again, particularly men's communities, is it's actually bidirectional. So there's ageism, which typically we're thinking about older age, but then there's also youthism. So it's the same thing, but it's basically stereotypes about young people based on nothing but the fact that they're young.
Very true.
And so in the dominant culture, we see a generational divide, but in queer communities, we see a generational chasm. We have just like, there's dog years. There's also what's called gay years. So by the time you're 30 in queer communities, you're actually middle-aged. And by the time you're 35, you're pretty much over the hill. And what's tragic about that is imagine yourself as a young person feeling all alone. So I went to a high school with 3,000 to 4,000 students. I knew what gay was. I knew that I was. I knew that statistically I couldn't be the only one out of 4,000. but I was the only one that I knew of.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pretty much alone. I didn't really belong. When I was 17, I was in San Francisco, my very first gay pride parade, sitting in the middle of Market Street, surrounded by 250,000 other queers just like me.
Mm.
And let me tell you, it was like the heavens opened and the choirs were singing and the trumpets were blasting, because I finally found a place where I belonged. And it was the queer community. And then as I got older, that community that I finally found a sense of belonging started to reject me for no other reason than the fact that I was getting older. And we see this pretty pervasively. There was a qualitative study done in Arizona some years back, and they were asking young lesbian, gay, bisexual people to imagine their future selves as old people. And the younger lesbian, bisexual women had no problem imagining a wonderful future with family and everything else. And universally, the younger men, the gay and bisexual men, were very much the opposite. They could not imagine themselves being happy as they were older. There was one person who made a comment, something to the effect of, I see an older straight couple walking down the street holding hands, and I think, oh, that's so cute. I see an older gay couple doing the same thing, and I go, ooh, that's gross. I know it's wrong, but that's how I experienced the world. So we have really internalized that our value is based on youth and beauty, and in particular masculinity. And as we start to lose all of those as a function of getting older, our value starts to trickle down the drain.
Everything you said, yes, yes, and yes. I'm sure you heard me amening all through what you were saying. I will also say in the same breath, what I've noticed is that there is lately, and I want to get your take on this too, lately there's been sort of a shift when it comes to particularly Gen Z interest in Gen X. When my husband and I are out, we rarely hold hands in public. I don't know if it's internalized homophobia or if it's the fact that we're both earth signs and just ain't having none of that. I don't know, but what I will say is when people see us out, especially younger people, they're like, oh, how long have you been together? Like they're interested. And that no one is more surprised by that than me. And my friends are feeling the same thing. Any idea or any experience similar lately with you, and any idea as to like why that might be occurring?
So this is my personal perspective. I don't have any data to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
The daddy thing is definitely there. I went through my own daddy phase for a few years when I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. I think generally, so I'm probably going to put my foot in my mouth here, but what the heck, I've done that before.
Awesome.
So in the straight community, older men become more desirable when they also have the more desirable bank accounts. If you don't have that desirable bank account, then even though you're older, you're not going to be as desirable. I've seen that, the same thing in the gay community. I do have to acknowledge, I was teaching a MSW class, and this was a few years back. This was in Utah, which is a whole other story. And I forget the exact context. And I've always had students who are out in classes because I'm always out in classes. And we brought up this thing, we were discussing ageism, that particular class session, and started talking about older gay men. And so what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And one of the students popped up with daddy and kind of knocked me off my heel. I actually didn't know how to respond, so I kind of left and went on. I think that Gen Z, it's a major shift. So in February of last year, the Gallup polling company, so it's a national population-based representative sample, and every year they do this poll, how many people identify as LGBT, things like that.
I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Among older adults, it's about 2.5% to 3% who actually self-identify. And I was, to use the old term my parents used, flabbergasted that last year, almost 21% of Gen Z identifies somewhere on the non-straight, non-cis spectrum. So I think their world is a lot broader. They have access to more information and actually more access to examples. So when I was growing up, as a young teenager in my 20s, I saw myself represented in the media in one of three ways typically. That was either a hairdresser, a drag queen, or a child molester. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a particular interest in being any of those, so I never really saw a future for myself. And I certainly never had any queer role models. And I think we're seeing more of that. We are seeing in the media, there's increasingly representations of older gay people, and it's decreasingly tragic. So up until, and actually through Brokeback Mountain, when it was a big thing, when it came out, every single gay story that I ever saw started out with beautiful, deep love and ended up with the tragic death of one or the other. So that was kind of my imagination pool for my future, so to speak. So I think that Gen Z now sees much more of the reality of our lives, and it's not all doom and gloom and tragedy and things like that.
A more flexible and broader realm of possibilities. And I think you hit it on the head. We'll be right back after this. The fall 2024 election is pivotal. Everything. Supreme Court justice picks to replace Alito and Thomas for at least the next 30 years. Women's personal health care rights and access, and most importantly, the ability for us to be able to vote about things like this in the future instead of having it all determined for us by rich, anti-gay, anti-woman a-holes is at stake. To learn more about what'll be on the ballot where you live and learn how to show and tell others, go to vote.gov and get in on the action. That's vote.gov. It's not too late yet. Go there today. That's vote.gov. What one or two tidbits of advice might you have for any queer individual over 50 who might be seeking a partner over 50?
So that's an excellent question. In recent years, we've seen definite declines in bar culture as a place to meet people.
Right.
When I'm working with people around topics like this, I suggest they try a different tact. So, for example, there's I don't know if it's called an app or a website, not the most technologically advanced. It's called Meetup. And so basically people who have a common interest. So, for example, I like building and flying model rockets. So there's a meetup group for building and flying model rockets. So instead of trying to find someone who's gay, try to find someone who's interested in something that you're interested in. Nice. And if then they happen to be gay on top of it, so much the better.
Great advice. There have been a myriad advances in science regarding HIV treatment and prevention, to the point where now over half of HIV positive people are 50 years old and up. Now, for those who are HIV positive, do you believe dating and relationships are at all different from those who are HIV negative, or not so much?
So up until the last few years, absolutely, positively. Up until, I'd say, probably somewhere around 8 years ago, the very, very first question that would typically come up was, what's your status? Mm-hmm. And it was not uncommon at all for people to zero-sort. So negative guys would only date negative guys, and positive guys would only date positive guys. You think about the simple math behind it. That figure's not accurate, but let's say that 10% of the population identifies as queer, and about half of that, so 5% of the population identifies as queer men. So instead of having half the entire population as your potential dating pool, you've got 5% of the population as your potential dating pool. And then if you're HIV positive, that cuts it down much, much more. But over the last few years, I was a little surprised when I first started reading it, but it's now pretty much accepted that as long as an HIV positive person's viral load is undetectable, they basically cannot transmit the HIV virus because there's just not enough there. I think common now for HIV status to come up, at least initially in dating. It may come up the first time you're going to go do the nasty, but in terms of just dating to begin with, I don't think it's as much. After you've lived with it for 20 or 30 years, because like you said, today over half the population of HIV positive Americans are aged 50 and older. By 2030, that's going to be more than 70%. So actually, as an older person, your potential gene pool is expanding where before it was contracting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think finally, it's just being HIV positive is not the death sentence it used to be. When you're first diagnosed, it's huge. But after you've lived with it for a while, it kind of recedes into the background. So I don't think there's as much, HIV is as much of a factor in dating today.
And staying on the topic here of your research and data in general, with Age Pride, for example, what you're attempting to accomplish each day, in my opinion, is no small feat, but it's powerful. And of course, it's been working. Have you experienced any hiccups or challenges in your mission to transfer data into action out in the world? And if so, what have some of those challenges been, and how did you get beyond them?
So probably the single biggest challenge is grant funding. So there are three primary criteria: significance, innovation, and approach. So significance is it a problem? Innovation is, approach is how you're going to address the problem. So should it be done? Approach is, can it be done? And innovation is how it will be done. You have to be like in the top 1% of the top 1% typically to get a grant funded. Karen Fredrickson Goldson, founder, director of the Goldson Institute, has been getting NIH, NIMH, NIA funding since 1994. So she's got an ongoing significant track record. So we're able to get the funding. The biggest logistical issue is that although we've made great strides in terms of openness and acceptance over the last few decades, that depends on where you're located. So there's, I do trainings all over Washington State. And so many states, the major metropolitan areas are rather blue and the rest of the states are rather red. And so the farther away you get away from the blue, the more often I come across, well, I wish they would just keep it to themselves. This isn't important. We don't need to know about it. So just not recognizing that people are people and need help. On the other hand, we're seeing more and more that people's hearts are changing where their minds wouldn't change before. It's kind of a challenge when your daughter comes out as trans, or your son comes out as non-binary, or your grandfather even says, hey, by the way, I'm gay.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. Let's discuss the topic of compatibility. I'm going to ask you to put on your therapist cap here. Now, compatibility, of course, can mean multiple things to different people. And as a therapist, what do you believe are good indicators of compatibility? You mentioned one when you were talking about meetup, which brilliant. What, in your opinion, are warning signs?
So I guess the biggest warning sign, so Kevin, my first partner, used to say, sex is what you do in bed, love is what you do the other 23 hours of the day. If you're not having a lot of fun outside of that hour you're spending in bed, that's probably a good indicator that you don't have a lot in common. From a purely therapeutic perspective, one of the things that I think can be most valuable is when you're with someone that you're either in a relationship in or you're seriously considering being in a relationship in, what is it that they do or say that pisses you off? And when you identify that, then ask yourself, okay, where in your life are you the one doing that?
Yeah.
Because, we project really well. We typically don't realize we're doing it. Most of the time when someone is doing something that annoys us, it's probably because we're doing the same thing. We just don't like to see it in ourselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, another good question to ask yourself is, suppose you woke up tomorrow morning and neither of you had a sex drive anymore. How would you spend your day? What would you be doing? I would also encourage people to think about, are you interested in getting into a relationship with this person because you're interested in being in a relationship with this person, or do you just want to be in a relationship? Because if you just want to be in a relationship, that's probably not going to be a very solid foundation.
1 second. Repeat what you just said, that sentence, please. Everybody listen up.
If you want to be in a relationship with that person because you want to be in a relationship with that person, that's great. But if you want to be in a relationship with that person because you want to be in a relationship, that's probably not a very solid foundation for a relationship.
Now I'm going to get personal with you, Charlie. Feel free to tell me to shut up. Okay. Are you currently partnered? And if so, how did that decision come about? Navigating all of that?
So my husband and I, one of our 3 anniversaries was actually day before yesterday on Wednesday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Back in 2008, one of the ways that people were still primarily meeting each other, or was becoming more primary, I forget, it was a long time ago, was through online dating sites. There was a particular dating, so I have my own particular predilections that I'm not going to go into, but there was a particular website that catered to people with that particular range of predilections. And I get an email from this guy one day. He said, hey, I was looking at your profile, looked really interesting. Do you want to talk or whatever? So we exchanged a couple of emails, sounded like a really great guy. So we decided to meet at a tavern the next Tuesday after work at like 5 o'clock, because kind of midway between where we were each working. So I get there a little bit before 5, and I'm sitting and waiting and sitting and waiting and sitting and waiting and sitting and waiting. And finally at 5:30, he wasn't there, so I left, and I was pretty pissed. So I went home and I wrote what I thought was a blistering email saying, you know, the hell with you, blah, blah, blah. And he emailed back, and he got into my heart at that moment. Oh. He said, I'm sorry, I completely forgot.
Oh.
There was no excuses, no tap dancing, no hoopla, just, I'm sorry I forgot. And please give me an opportunity to make up for it. So I said, okay, what the heck. So we met that Saturday, day after my 48th birthday. And man, this guy has got legs like there's no tomorrow, let me tell you.
Okay.
But it was great. So we actually have 3 anniversaries, our hand fasting, our domestic partnership, and our actual marriage. So yeah, it's been very interesting. So we've been together since 2008. August 23rd will be 16 years, 17 years, if I can do the math.
That is gorgeous. I'm so happy you shared that story. Hey, guess what? June 28th is International LGBT Pride Day. The first Pride marches were held on June 28, 1970, in cities such as New York and Los Angeles, and the day is now a celebration of the fight for equality and dignity for all LGBTQ plus people. To learn more about the days, weeks, and months that celebrate us and recognize our contributions and achievements, go to glad.gov, that's GLAAD.gov/reference/calendar. And happy Pride! So he had you at I forgot. I love it. What about family structure? Talk about that a little bit.
It's been really interesting over the last 10, 20 years to see how family structures and dynamics have really evolved, particularly in the United States. So we're increasingly seeing people living together apart. So people who are in a committed relationship but may live in different states or opposite coasts or things like that. One thing I think is really exciting is that we're seeing increasing polyamory. So realizing that love doesn't have to be restricted to 2 people. And so I think people being able to really exude that and accept that is really great. It also offers more possibilities for young people. So I know that when same-sex relationships started really becoming part of the news and everything, there was all of this, oh, won't someone think of the children? They're going to be so damaged, blah, blah, blah. What research has been done has typically found there is almost no difference in childhood outcomes among kids in straight versus same-sex parent relationships. But where there are differences, it almost always favors the kids whose parents are same-sex. Because for one thing, there's not that historic socialization around gender roles. So if you got two guys, well, one of you is going to have to wash the dishes and one of you is going to have to mow the lawn, and you can't say, well, since your reproductives are the innie, you get to do the dishes, and my reproductive organs are the outies, so I'll go mow the lawn. So if you're both outies or you're both innies, you're not necessarily dividing up the labor by whether you have innies or outies.
What relationship advice? And by relationship, it could be dating, family, work, people in general, any sorts of systems. What relationship advice would you give your 30-year-old self today?
So this is a challenging question, but I'm going to try to rise to the occasion. I think this is that, like if it was a Venn diagram, it's where the personal and the professional overlap. Like you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, primarily working with queer community for 20 years now. And for all the differences, there's a lot of similarities. I encourage people, and it's a practice that you can cultivate. It's a little challenging, but we all as human beings, and some people will deny it, but I'm not going to buy it, that we make default judgments. We tell stories to ourselves that we don't even realize that we're telling stories to ourselves about ourselves. So, I can be in a line at the grocery store and someone ahead of me is doing something that's taking seconds away from my day. And so I make up this story about how they're this and they're that and blah, blah, blah. So I encourage people to make a practice in your personal life, in your relationships, in your work life, and anywhere in your life where you encounter other people. Spend some time just catching yourself making judgments. Don't try to defend them, anything, just say, oh, Charlie, you're doing that thing again. Don't try to dissect it, anything else. Just get into the habit of recognizing when you're making judgments. Then you can move to the next step, which is when you're pretty good at catching yourself making judgments, then catch a judgment, say, okay, what is it I'm judging here? What am I getting out of it? What am I expending my energy for? And what is the story I'm telling myself? That's the most important thing. What is the story I'm telling myself? Once I can identify what the story I'm telling myself is, challenge yourself to come up with 3 alternative storylines. It doesn't matter which one is real, because most of the time we'll never know.
I think it's very, very good advice. Thank you. This has been incredible. I don't want it to end. I know you have things to do. We're actually going to wrap up, but I do want to thank our guest today on Still Here Bitch, everybody, Dr. Charles Hoy-Ellis. Charlie, is there a website or anything where you would like people to go to see what's going on with you and your work?
Yeah, so the Goldsen Institute, so it's spelled Goldsen, goldseninstitute.org. So it's all one word, all lowercase. We do our basic research, so that's the National Health, Aging, Sexuality, Gender Study. Karen Fredrickson Goldsen. We also have the Global Pride Study, so we're doing globally what we did nationally. There's also a Wellness with Pride, so it has our basic research, our intervention research, and then our Age Pride. All of the papers we've ever published are freely available and downloadable on that website. Just click on the resources tab. You can read anything we've ever published. We are also recruiting, particularly people ages 50 to 59. So to be eligible, you have to be 50 years old or older and identify as queer. So part of life is that older people die And so we need to replenish our sample. So we're currently in the process of replenishing for the younger end of the generations as the older end rides off into the sunset. But it's goldsoninstitute.org. It's a great place to play around.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Dr. Charles Hoy-Ellis. Thank you, Charlie. I'd also like to thank you, our SHB family. Thank you for tuning in to our monthly podcast. We are here for you. So if you have any ideas on topics for the show, please don't be shy. You can reach us at hello@shbpodcast.com. And before we go, I'd like to leave you with this. Education plus innovation equals persuasion. You heard it here first. Thanks, everybody. Remember to vote. Now go out and get you some joy.